Hello everyone, we are going to do something fun today where I'm sitting down with my colleague and friend JP, and we're going to be talking through a use case using large language models and AI. And recently you'd posted up something on LinkedIn around building out personalities for the AI personas.
Right.
And so I want to unpack that with you. And while we're doing that, we're going to code up a user interface that's going to let you configure your idea, test your idea out.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it's something that you can take away and refine your ideas and experiment with. And we're going to do that in real time.
That's great. Yeah, so I was thinking the other day, every time I'm using large language models or ChatGPT, when you get your response, it's pretty generic.
Yeah.
And I was looking at, is there a possibility that you could add personality to these responses? When you're doing creative literature or anything like that, and you're trying to develop characters, you want your characters to have their own personality. Or even when it's responding, I always find myself asking it to change the tone, change the style, change the approach, and I could never really find the right tone for me, and I end up playing along with it for a while. So to avoid all that work, I was trying to come up with a concept to say, can I create a system or a framework of some sort that I could consistently just dial in on a personality? So can I create personality for my AI assistant?
Right. So what are some of the characteristics you have? I have your presentation here. Maybe you can talk us through what some of the ideas are there.
Yeah, sure. So originally, my original thought, again, things that can be adjusted is tone of voice, the language style, emotional expression, the pacing and timing of how you deliver your message, the formality, is it the level of politeness or directness, the humor and wit, personalization, engagement, and then the last one was cultural sensitivity. And so for each one of these characteristics, I'd assign it a range from 0 to 20. And then that would allow us to give a different range for each characteristic.
Perfect. And so there's the range. You have some ranges there. We can work off of that one. And you said something interesting about these. These might not be the characteristics.
They may not be.
Would you want the ability to then develop different characteristics dynamically? And or would you want to work inside of a consistent framework and see what happens in that?
So for the way I approached it is I approached it to have a specific framework, and then I would tweak it. But I think down the road, depending on the results that came out, like I was really happy with the results when I was playing with it.
Right.
But I would certainly want to play with different frameworks just to see and compare them. But I go one framework at a time. Mm-hmm. And so as I take the characteristic and as I take the intensity or level, I put them together, and that creates a matrix.
Right.
And that matrix allows you then, I think I got it to 250 million different personality types by tweaking, whatever characteristic.
Sure. I'm going to try to use the new Claude 3.5. It just came out 2 days ago, and so it would be a good test to go through it. And it seems, in my testing, to be reasonably reliable and proficient. So we're going to do that. We're also going to be using Prime View. So this is a web user interface for Vue. So it has 80 different components in it, and it's going to help us build your components out, your sliders and your text boxes and your links and things like that really quickly.
That's great.
So we're going to use Prime View for that. So to get started, let's jump in. We have two things running. We have a web app, which is going to be the user interface we're going to build your prototype into. And then in the background, we have an API server running. And that is taking all of your requests and it's routing them through to the large language models, and it's getting a response. So those two things are working in parallel with each other. So the way that the large language models are configured is that you can pass in two different types of prompt. You can pass a system prompt, which is roughly the configuration of it, what it's supposed to do. Think of it as the job description. And then the user prompt is more of a task description. I have a personality framework, third time's a charm, personality framework. And I want a Vue 3x script setup component to capture the attributes and allow me to adjust them with a slider interface. I also want to be able to have a text area and a for the user prompt and the system prompt, and I want a button to activate a LLM for interaction. So calling a simple function called let's go. And then what else do I want to do? I want to use prime view components for this. I also need to install that in npm. So I can help with that. So first we're going to install prime view and prime icons. So it's doing that. And then what it's doing is it's building out the view.js web interface. So template is what you would think of HTML, and script is your JavaScript. And then let's go is your function. And there it's just going to spit out your attributes because it doesn't know how we call the language model. And then here there's a little bit of styling that it's put in there. So it has some web styling. And then it also has how to import prime view into our app, which we'll have to do. And then if we're going to have that personality framework as a component, rendering it on the page, how do you import it? So it's pretty good. It's able to lay out step by step. What I didn't give it is your framework. So refactor, use this framework and have the components dynamically generated from an array within each array. So we'll just start with that. Actually, I'll give it your framework. So that'll start with number 1. I think I cut it off, and then we'll go from there. So let's run that. And so now it should refactor the web interface. So now we have personality framework. We will have something called where is that? Personality attributes. So there's something called a v-for, which is a loop, which will take each of those attributes and render it on the screen one by one, rather than us having to code it. And then down below, we have your attributes down here. So there's a name and then a description, which is what you've given us. And then there's a default value. And the last thing I'll say is, okay, make the sliders from 1 to 20 range and set the attributes to 10 by default. So middle of the road, right? So we'll do that, refactor it one more time. And now we're going to take this and drop it right into our web interface. And we can paste all that content right here. So now we should have a component, and just for simplicity, we can bring that right into our homepage. Okay? And then here we should just be able to drop the personality framework right on the homepage. And we should have that show up. So here is your first look at that. So it's not super styled, but you've got your sliders, your tone of voice, your personality, expression. We'll have to play around with the styling really quick. And then you've got these text areas. So text area just lets you put in a user prompt and a system prompt. Right. And then there's a button called interact with LLM at the bottom. Right? So there's your AI personality framework. We want this framework to generate out a persona. Right. So what I've done is I've just given it a system prompt, your personality generator or persona generator. You reference these attributes and you use it to generate a personality. Right. And provide a proposed backstory and set of motivations for this character. And then as you adjust this, then these numbers will get fed into your prompt. Right. So generated character named JP. JP is a wizard who lives in the mythical land of Awato, which is Ottawa backwards. Generate a personality persona for him based on that. Okay. So then you could kind of come up with a backstory, and then you could change some of this stuff. Now we could bring in your grid as well.
It would know that directness, between 5 and 7 is right. Balanced, mixed, direct, indirect language. It would combine them all together in one profile prompt, and that profile prompt, I then said, speak to me, always using this profile prompt.
So I'm going to see if I can, to make your table more useful for an app, right? Because we're bringing it into an app here. Return this in JSON. All right, so let's see. So what I'm hoping it'll do is it'll take your table. So personality framework 1, tone of voice, and then you see 0 to 3, 4 to 6, and then it has the tone there, right? So based on this personality framework, and it seems to be capturing it. Oh, it's filled it in, because I said 10, so it's filled it in by itself to give us a sense of that. Oh, actually, no, did it have it from up above? Oh yeah. So it's actually filled in the descriptions for all those as well. So we could use this. Yeah. Let's use this as a starting point. So I'll copy that, and we're going to bring this into our personality framework as well. Equals, it's going to be a variable that we have, and so we can just bring in the JSON here. And what we can do is now we can attach this, and when it has slider number 1 there on tone of voice is a 12, it should be able to say that the character is balanced and moderately warm. That's what you had in mind, exactly, right? What I had. Okay, perfect. So here, as I change this now, it changes in the prompt. So it's supposed to, but this is static, right? So we have tone of voice. So if I change tone of voice to 20, what we want it to do is read the values that we're feeding into it. So tone of voice is 20, and we're hoping that it will reference this information to describe the character. So ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Balanced and moderately warm. See, it took that out of your slider. It took that out of your framework. So we said that we said that the value was 10, and then when we said the personality framework tone, if we said it was 10 to 12, balanced and moderately warm. Okay. So now it's actually writing how you speak based on the sliders. I love it. Does it make sense? So this is what we would feed in. Yes. To the next agent and give that as the system prompt. That's its personality. Right, and then you'd give it a user prompt. Right. We can add that right into here as well, right, and give it a scenario, but you need to kind of give it the story, right?
Yeah. I want to see if we could have it tell the story, because that's what the test is, right?
Use the following personality framework to present how he would respond. So then I can take what we just generated, exhibits no cultural awareness. All right, so then we'll generate that. And so now it's going to take this. So without looking at the door, so we know he's kind of a cold person. We put it to 1, right? Enter if you must. The door isn't locked, though perhaps it should be. Kind of sharp, right? As the visitor steps inside, JP's eyes remain fixed on the page. His words flow quickly, almost tumbling over. Remember we said he speaks quickly? Despite his cold demeanor, JP's eyes flicker with curiosity and concern. And then, so it goes on there like that. Right. So that's that one personality, the story driving that. And if we go back to here, let's go and just make him super friendly, but maybe we'll make him not so witty, and maybe he'll be a slow talker. Right. And we'll generate that again. So now it's going to reframe that and then into the story. So now that we have kind of a character generator, you now have to think about what's the flow to get to a story.
Right.
So now there's a knock on the door. You're deep in contemplation still after a long pause with measured steps and a warm voice. Greetings, O seeker at my threshold. Your arrival, it ripples through the etheric currents, a pebble cast in the ocean. Do not rush to speak. Anyway, so very different response.
So very different response, very different tone.
But yeah, it's completely different.
It's a different personality.
Right.
So we were able to show that we could actually create personality for our assistants.
Right, and now you have a reliable interface. Yeah. Based on your personality framework and the interface, you're now able to go forward and build out a whole different set of characters. So next time it's not the wizard named JP, it's a knight named whatever, and you could build out your different characters and then start to orchestrate storytelling. Of course, it doesn't have to be fictional characters. It could be assistant personas or whatever you wanted to have. Right. So what do you think?
I love it.
All right.
It works.
So I guess the next step would be if you wanted, it would be generate the character. Now create a roster of characters.
Right.
And then you can start to pick and tell who's telling which story.
Right. I'd have to play with it, because once you start playing with it, you're like, okay, well I can do this thing now with it. I could,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's publish it, and so it'll be live on the internet, and you can play with it right on the landing page.
That would be great.
And we'll move it into a tool
Sure.
in a couple of days.